Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I realized that it's been quite a while since I've sat down to record a proper video, so I thought I would get back into my routine with a new quarterly series called What I Watched. And this is essentially what I watched for the 2016 spring anime season. Now, before I get into talking about any of the series, this really isn't an in-depth review of them. This is just kind of my thoughts and a roundup of sorts of the top titles that I enjoyed. It's not going to be in any particular order, except I'm saving the best for last because it was my favorite. So let's get started. The first series that I watched was Sailor Moon Crystal Season 3. And one of the first things that I noticed about this season was the change in the animation style. They abandoned that pseudo manga style that they had adopted in the first and second seasons, which I think was a really smart move because as beautiful as some manga is, the style doesn't translate well to moving medium like animation. I particularly liked how they kind of married the old classical style of the original Sailor Moon with the new modern styles that a lot of the shoujo animes are coming out with, especially when it involved Usagi's comedy or her ditziness. And because of that, I think it kind of created a new dynamic for the series that it didn't have before in the first two seasons, or that it was a major part of the original. Now, season 3 covered the Deathbusters arc, which in the manga is called the Infinity arc, and it introduced all of the outer senshi, Neptune, Uranus, Pluto, and Saturn, as well as gave Chibiusa a more important role versus the first two seasons, as well as the introduction of Super Sailor Moon. I definitely like that with Crystal. This season followed the manga a lot closer as a whole, especially when it came to a lot of the darker plot points that the characters were involved in. And perhaps one of my favorite things about this season were its ending themes. They just were so reminiscent of some of the original ending themes of the early 90s, not necessarily with Sailor Moon, but just with anime in general. Now, as much as I love Sailor Moon, this season did kind of have some cons to it, and it's mostly that there really wasn't any filler episodes like there were in the classics, the classical series. And the reason that I kind of missed that was because the classical series used those filler episodes to really flesh out the characters more, so you kind of got to understand them better. But the new series, both with seasons 1 and 2 and season 3, really wanted to focus on the plot and moving that forward. But I think they did a very good job in general, and I was super excited to finally meet the outer senshi. Now, I'm not going to lie, I am hoping and praying that they announce a 4th season, because the next season would be the Dream arc. And I ship Helios and Chibiusa so hard. They were what introduced me to ship culture. I already fangirl enough over it, but oh my god, I am gonna lose my shit. So fingers crossed, like, do whatever you have to do. I don't care. Let's hope that they do a season 4. I really want a season 4. The next series that I watched was Sakamoto Desu ga, or Don't You Know, I'm Sakamoto. Now, I'm not normally a fan of one-shot series that don't follow a particular timeline, but the premise of this show just seemed too funny not to skip. I mean, the titular character is the personification of perfection, and he literally turns any situation to his benefit. So it was kind of ridiculous to see, like, he's so cool. The story itself revolves around Sakamoto and his daily activities and interactions, but because it is sort of a one-shot per half episode series, a lot of the character development, if you will, and plot development revolves around mostly one-note secondary characters. But that was one of the things that I enjoyed the most about it. While Sakamoto is hilarious in his own perfect way, the way the characters reacted to him is what made each episode so enjoyable. As a whole, this show was kind of my go-to show when I needed a laugh after watching a particularly heavy episode of some of the other series. Not to mention, the music video for the opening song Coolest is pretty funny, and if you haven't seen it, I will link it down below. The next series is Boku no Hero Academia, or My Hero Academia. Now this is a classic Shonen Jump title at its core, but the charm of the main character, Midoriya, is really what hooked my husband and I, and had us counting down each week for a new episode. And one of the things that I really enjoyed about it was that it's a character-driven story, so all of the characters are unique, both the descriptions of their powers and their personalities, and you're kind of always looking forward to see what their growth is going to be and where they fit into the plot of the story surrounding Midoriya and All Might. But with that being said, the true draw of this story is its compassion and empathy for the main character Midoriya. His determined bravado, if you will, in the face of all of these challenges, despite in the beginning his lack of any abilities, is really what made you feel for him, and it made you want him to succeed. Moreover, All Might's design and characterization, in contrast to Midoriya's, was the perfect balance. I also really enjoyed the style and animation of everything, particularly All Might's character design, just because it stood out in such stark contrast to any other characters. It was really kind of reminiscent of what classic Western comics like Superman or Batman looked like. All in all, I am really excited that they are going to be doing a season 2 for this. I can't wait to see where it goes. The fourth show I watched is Kiznaiva, and before I get into talking about how I feel about it, what was that? This seemed like one of the more polarizing titles of this season. People either loved it or hated it. Now let it be known that, like many otaku, I am a huge Trigger fan, and this title was no different. However, my biggest qualm with this series is its length. Each character is so visually interesting, and throughout the early episodes we're shown what makes them personality-wise equally unique, yet halfway through the season it felt like most of those quirks of the core cast were abandoned in favor of a very rushed plot. Now that's not to say that there weren't some exponentially heavy and incredibly exhausting moments of feels, but had this series been expanded to 24 or 26 episodes, I feel like a lot of the meaning and plot could be expanded on in a way that made the main point of contention, the Kizna system, more meaningful. Perhaps one of the more recognizable aspects of the series was that a lot of the dialogue was something I could relate to, in that I felt that I had had those conversations before with old and new friends alike. That being said, Kiznaiva is still a gorgeous anime, and with character design and animation, it lives up to the status that Trigger has claimed for itself as an amazing production company. And it also introduced arguably one of the best opening songs I have ever heard. Despite its shortcomings, Kiznaiva made the list of one of my favorites, if not just for the character of Hisomu. And additionally, it has one of the cutest confession scenes in the last episode that I've ever seen. The next series I watched was Kotetsujo no Kabaneri, or Kabaneri of the Iron Fortress. First off, I'm not gonna deny that I really enjoyed this anime, but English Lit major Amy has some major contentions with the story, and I'm gonna break it down. Visually, this anime is stunning, breathtaking. There isn't a single aspect of the animation that I could really say that they cut corners on. From the character design to the landscapes to the action sequences, they made it impossible to look away. There was always something to look at in a single scene. And my favorite aspect is the character design, which is kind of reminiscent of early 90s to 2000 anime like Sakura Wars, Iria, Zerum the Animation, and Dominion Tank Police, especially in its female character design. Right from the start, Ikoma was one of my favorite characters and remained so throughout the season. Mume started out pretty cute and I liked her, but then when it got to the point where she showed her ignorance and immaturity, beyond that, my least favorite character was Biba, and not because he was the villain. His status as a villain was paltry at best, given that his character development was shallow, vague, and awfully bland. Ayame was incredibly interesting at first, but the story failed to give her the background and the development that she needed to go beyond being just a figurehead. While the premise of the anime is eye-catching, a steampunk anime based in feudal Japan that's being overrun by zombie-like creatures, the execution was pretty poor. It runs into the same problem Kisnaiba had. Too much plot, not enough time. And while plenty of the action was visually engaging, when it came time to flesh out the plot, we were left with obnoxiously safe answers. Despite its shortcomings, it was visually, audibly, and characteristically, sometimes, pretty entertaining. And I'm not gonna pretend like Ikoma finally cutting his hair wasn't one of the more enjoyable moments for me, but as a whole, it was an enjoyable series that I genuinely looked forward to watching every week. The next anime I watched was Joker Game. Unlike many of the other titles I watched this season, Joker Game was really devoid of the magic and mecha that I usually gravitate towards when I'm picking out my anime. To put it simply, it's a psychological drama that takes place in World War II era Japan, and it follows the stories of 12 young men that are part of the fictional D Agency. It should be mentioned that this was based on an actual novel series, not like a light novel, but actual novel series. So while it's emphasized at the beginning of every episode that the stories are fictional, it's clear that a lot of the information and plot points of each episode were taken from historical records. And as such, that lends a sort of seriousness to the show that isn't often seen in other dramas. However, while the premise is pretty interesting, the episodic nature of the series kind of prevents everything from coming together in a way that would make it truly enjoyable. I found that I only enjoyed maybe 3-4 episodes out of everything. I mean, pretty often, whenever we sat down to watch a new episode, I would have to ask my husband, what happened in the last episode? Because I don't remember. Furthermore, I did not like the character design. Too many of the males in D Agency looked exactly the same. And I had such a hard time differentiating who was what until like halfway through the episode, I would realize, oh wait, that's a different character. So I didn't like that they literally had the exact same faces with maybe a different part and slightly different height. Everything from the hair color to the eye color to the build was almost the same. So it was like, are they meant to be clones or what? So between the format and the formulaic plots each episode, Joker Game just really didn't stand up to the expectations I had for it. But by no means does that mean don't check it out, because it's actually a really interesting show if you watch it all at once. It just didn't live up to my expectations. The sixth series I'm going to talk about, Bungo Stray Dogs. Now this was similar to Kisnaiba in that people either loved it or hated it, and I'm in the former camp. I thought it had an engaging story and beautiful animation, and frankly, that really helped to balance the series nicely when it came to comedy and drama. The fight scenes were dramatic and lively, and the comedy earned a lot of chuckles out of me thanks to the unique personas of each character. But as fun of a ride as Bungo Stray Dogs was, it did seem to be lacking a little bit in certain character development, which I guess it sacrificed in lieu of a more important plot. And while I can kind of hold out hope that they may remedy that in season 2, given the way season 1 ended, I'm not exactly holding my breath. That said, aside from that particular detail, I thoroughly enjoyed this anime. With well-placed comedic timing, an engaging plot, one of my favorite OSTs and openings of the season, I imagine I'm gonna have just as much fun next season. The next series I watch, Kyokai no Rinne Season 2. Rumiko Takahashi. If there is one mangaka after my heart, it's her. I have loved nearly everything she has put out. And I say nearly everything because by the end, not even the end, halfway through Inuyasha, I was rooting for Naraku. But Kyokai no Rinne was refreshingly nostalgic of one of her top titles from the past, Ranma 1/2. Story-wise, it doesn't delve very deep into the drama, instead choosing to remain a little more light-hearted and sometimes slapstick, even during more serious scenes. But its main female protagonist, Sakura Mamiya, is uniquely peaceful in a lot of her interactions, both with Rinne and the spirits of the spirit world, which was kind of refreshing for me considering a lot of her other main characters were volatile and kind of angry at times. Rinne himself is pretty likable despite his economic status because he never manages to lose his cool in the face of his enemies. Sure, he's shocked, but he always seems to be one step ahead of them, which made things pretty funny. And while Kyokai no Rinne isn't a really remarkable series, it manages to be enjoyable and keep me laughing thanks to Takahashi's unique writing style and comedy. There are certain things that she does well that not many other people can do. The second to last anime I'm going to talk about is Re:Zero Kara Hajimaru Isekai Seikatsu, or Starting Life in a New World. Arguably one of the best titles this season. I actually started it pretty late, only really getting into it by the time episode 8 or 9 was out. But given that I had all of these other ones to watch, you can understand why. While the art and animation isn't really something to get excited about, reminding me kind of Sword Art Online, the story completely makes up for that. With a lot of common tropes like goofy otaku, magic users, time traveling, maid monster girls, this anime could have easily fallen into the cut and paste fairy tale anime that have been coming out as of late. Season service. Oh, excuse me. But it doesn't. Perhaps one of the most important aspects of the show is that there isn't a single moment that feels uninteresting, whether it's the characters or the plot. There is always something to be paying attention to. So while the art and sometimes the animation isn't really anything to shake a stick at, that doesn't detract from it in the least. And in fact, it kind of adds to the charm of the storyline. Add to that the opening and ending were pretty damn good, and this is a must-watch series. So if you're looking for a damn good show to watch in spring 2016, this is definitely it. So before I talk about my last and favorite series of this season, there were of course some series that I dropped, but just like I didn't give them the time to watch, I'm not really gonna give them the time to talk about them. But just so you know which ones they were, I'm gonna flash them on screen for 3 seconds. And go. Now moving on. Now I said I was saving the best for last, and this is actually one that I really didn't see a lot of people talk about on a couple of the forums that I follow, so I'm probably alone in this. But my favorite series of spring 2016 is, because it's still going, Kodomo Kudo. To be honest, I didn't actually preview this series with the preview trailers on YouTube before I actually watched it. I saw the preview image on AniChart, and the first thing I thought was that the main character reminded me of one of my other favorite characters, and that was what told me I'm gonna watch this. One of my favorite things about this is it's got a lot of shonen and a little bit of shoujo, and it all works. Mecha, feudal Japan, cool samurai, bashful romance, aliens. None of those are particularly unique genres, but Kodomo Kudo manages to use them all in a way that makes it interesting and believable without seeming contrived. While some of the secondary characters aren't that interesting, the core cast of Kennosuke, Yukine, and her family make up for that in a way that make me too excited for the next episode. In fact, they can't come out with the next episode fast enough. Admittedly, Yukine seemed like a character, a heroine, that was gonna get aggravating throughout the series. However, she turned out to be just the opposite, having a personality and reactions that seemed imaginably real given everything that she was going through. So between fantastic animation, interesting main characters, and a plot that makes me way too excited for each episode, Kodomo Kudo is my favorite. So that is what I watched for spring 2016. And I hope you enjoyed this video, maybe learn a thing or two about a series that you weren't quite sure you wanted to watch and are decided to pick it up now. Of course, I will be doing another one come the end of summer 2016, and again I will be talking about a couple of the titles that were rollover titles from spring. So let me know in the comments below what were some of the titles that you liked from spring 2016.